Kia ora and welcome to We Do B2B. We have an awesome guest with us on the show today, a guest of such pedigree that I will freely admit that I'm a little nervous about the conversation here. We have Amanda Armstrong from Revenue Lab. Amanda's background, I'll let her cover off on some of it herself, but if you think global revenue executive leader, you'd be kind of in the right ballpark. So I won't overdo the introduction, I'll leave that to Amanda. So, Amanda, tell us about yourself.
All as I do now really is just help tech companies to develop repeatable, scalable revenue. And I guess after years, like 20 plus, if you look closely, you can tell, 20 plus as a sales and marketing leader. And then the last 10 years, I've been working very much in high growth tech organizations. And now I'm sort of helping, a multitude of organizations and working quite closely with NZTE and organisations like that, really just to kind of help New Zealand tech companies grow and scale globally.
Fantastic. Now we're here at the Marketing Association today, which in a strange turn of events used to be your office, am I right?
This is where I started out. Very first, I guess, the first part of the time I was at Xero, this was our office here. So, I mean, given that it fitted probably less than 100 people, the time that I was there grew from like about 100 to, or it might have been 300 counting Wellington, but 100 here in Auckland, something like, 1,500 globally.
Wow.
By the time I left, so crazy growth. Yeah.
So you were at Xero. Tell us a little bit about where else you were, because I know that you've worked for some pretty big names from New Zealand.
Yeah, so I spent 3.5 years at Xero, and I started out as country manager and then started working in a global capacity the second part of my time there. And it was really working with, we'd promoted a lot of sales people to sales leadership roles, and they'd had no leadership development, a lot of them had no understanding as to what good leadership looked like.
Okay. So
I was really sort of trying to help build the capability, the leadership capability and sales capability across the business. And then I went into Vend, which was another cool Kiwi company growing quickly. And I was CRO there for a couple of years, and then moved into a similar role at Crimson Education, which was kind of next level speed in terms of growth and number of countries we were opening. And so looked after all of sales and all of marketing, sales in terms of kind of process and tech and things like that. And I had 7 country managers reporting to me as well.
Wow.
So that was pretty full on. It was really full on. And then after that, I sort of always talked about maybe doing my own thing, and decided that I was getting too old for this crazy 24/7 type stuff, and that it was time to sort of, try and get a little bit more balance back in my life, and started doing, and I don't like to use the word consultant because people have an idea that consultants charge a lot of money and deliver little value. So whether that's right or whether it's not, I just try and say that, I'm kind of here as an advisor and helping tech companies to really get that repeatable, scalable growth that they're looking for.
I'd imagine that no day looks the same, and that sounds absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
Now you put up a post on LinkedIn, which really kind of popped you onto my radar a couple of weeks ago, which was effectively talking about taking the bolt cutters to the number 8 wire mindset in New Zealand. It being, entrenched within our psyche here in New Zealand, but something that holds New Zealand tech companies back from going further and faster. So tell us a little bit about that. I'd love to know how that DIY or number 8 wire mindset plays out within the tech space here in the country.
Yeah, look, I think not so much as putting the bolt cutters to it, but I think we're always, I guess, valued for our ingenuity and innovation that's sort of associated with that number 8 wire mentality. But in a lot of ways it holds us back as well, and it holds us back because we think we can do it all ourselves. And so therefore what you see is if you take say like a sector in the tech industry, you've generally got a couple of big players and then you have a whole lot of smaller companies. Mm-hmm. And the smaller companies are trying to do it all themselves. And so you see this lack of sharing, this lack of going to, I guess forming communities or getting support from one another. And they very much have this mentality of we can do it, we can build it ourselves. So that people, what I see, and I've worked with a myriad of tech companies over the last 3 years, and some sort of for longer periods than others. And also through the NZTE, like I facilitate their, I've facilitated for the last 18 months both their Bite My SASS sessions here in Auckland and the Kiss My SASS, and now just do the Kiss My SASS. I've just actually going to just be doing the Kiss My SASS, which is the million ARR revenue and above, so slightly larger. But I see this kind of playing out through the sessions there as well, is that everybody's building their own stuff and they're not sharing. Like, here I've got a sales playbook, or hey, I've developed a process that maybe you could leverage and adapt for yourself, or, you know, just sharing the best practices. And there are people, you know, that are doing some really great stuff, but they're sort of holding on to it. And I think perhaps we're afraid that we don't want to let other people see our stuff. So I think we need to be better than that, because what I've observed, and I've done, like, I guess, got a reasonable amount of experience in the US market, not only with people that have been in the businesses that I've worked in, but also companies that are growing into there. And then previously, many years ago, I'd go up every year to the US with the time that I was at Wolters Kluwer, and I just see this great kind of sharing of collective knowledge and resources, and people don't feel this like holding on thing so much to what they've got. And yet I think it's the very thing that's holding us back from being able to really develop and grow faster. So yeah, it's kind of like the pros and the cons of it. I think it's very built into our Kiwi psyche that we can do it. You know, we can do it all ourselves. We've been first in the world to do a whole bunch of stuff. So why can we not be first in the world to do this too, you know?
And actually to share some of that knowledge.
Yeah.
So does that come from not being comfortable to ask for help, or not being comfortable to share what you've already done? What do you think is the bigger driver there?
I think it can be a bit of both of those things. I think it's also a little bit of afraid of the competition, you know, because New Zealand is small and the market's small. We don't want anyone to see what we're doing because it might be giving our, you know, intellectual property away. I think there's a little bit of that, perhaps coupled with a little bit afraid that it might show that they don't quite know what they're doing. And, you know, that kind of associated with that kind of I can do it, that individuality, like we can do it, we can make it.
See that
I think it's a combination of things, for sure.
It's quite interesting. I mean, in the SaaS sector, obviously, you know, pricing tends to be pretty transparent. You know, certainly for our client base and a lot of the, I suppose, more, you know, the manufacturing industries and things like that. Often people will try and play their cards really close to their chest in terms of pricing, because obviously there's this assumption that, well, if I put my pricing out into the world, then everyone knows what I'm charging. But I think here, you kind of, people realistically have a bit of an idea of what's being charged on the opposite side of the fence anyway.
Oh, totally. Yeah, totally. And, you know, generally that's sort of fairly well known. And in fact, even in a SaaS or tech environment, you know, it's kind of a bit of a black mark against you if you haven't got your pricing like transparent and open to the market. So it's more about their go-to-market strategy. It's more about what are the things that are helping them be effective and bringing customers to them. So I don't know, you know, sometimes I wonder whether it's even a conscious thing, but I hear that through NZTE and the customer managers that work very closely with tech companies as well, that they see this, you know, these smaller companies not really sharing resources and sharing ideas and sharing that kind of collective expertise that I think we could just do a much better job of.
And I'm sure, you know, across all the businesses that you work with and the experience that you have, you would see that there will be kind of common areas where people keep starting with a blank piece of paper. What's the one blank piece of paper that comes up time and time again that people just shouldn't have to rewrite from scratch? Yeah,
like go-to-market strategy. Yeah. Like, there's the kind of, like, you could have the base template or bones of a go-to-market strategy, and people don't quite know where to start. What should be in a go-to-market strategy? Doesn't need to be anything kind of, you know, don't over-engineer it if you're still very much in the kind of early stage and trying to, you know, maybe in product market fit, you still need a little bit of a go-to-market strategy. Maybe it's a one-pager. That's all it is, but it's actually going, this is our plan. This is what we're committing to for the next 3 months, 6 months. And of course that, with a go-to-market strategy, I mean, you still have to be flexible and adaptable with it, But you know that old saying of if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. And I see that so often is that actually if companies had a much clearer idea as to where they were going, how they're going to get there, the things that they're doing, with sort of a little bit more of a concerted plan, they'd be way more effective. And it's not to say that, you know, they zealously stick to the plan and don't deviate, because things are coming up all of the time. That is why that kind of flexibility and adaptability with it are really important.
So how can people actually kind of start to skin the cat, so to speak? Where can they start with being more collaborative in this approach?
Okay, well, I think that there's some good stuff already going on. That's been really interesting after this post. It's kind of engendered kind of people reaching out to me and having some conversations. So it was quite, which has been really great. And I think that, first of all, I've found out sort of the NZTE, it was like they seconded a few of their customer managers, and or certainly one that I'm aware of, into this global transformation program or plan. And actually, like, to take an example of the aquaculture sector, again, you've got a couple of big players and lots of little players. That plays out in pretty much, you know, agri-tech, like all of those spaces. And what they did is that they got an international partner who had a lot of experience and knowledge. First of all, they leverage global insights. They get an international partner and they have this person who's like, you know, a power connector effectively. And then they took this group of Kiwi companies across to this conference in Norway and used that as an opportunity, which is an aquaculture conference, to all of these Kiwi companies to come together, to learn, to be introduced, to get them introduced to the right people, to the, you know, movers and shakers in that area. And that was like, it worked really, really well. There's kind of lots of great feedback from that. But again, that was kind of like an innovation or accelerator program. And that was done sort of as a bit more of a one-off. And, you know, is that going to be continued? Not sure, but that's an example of something that worked really, really well. There are these power connectors, so I found out in the New Zealand market, who are, you know, they are very well connected. And if you're introduced to them, they can kind of help you collaborate, you know, more with overseas companies. But, you know, one of the things that kind of popped up in this conversation, which again, I think talks to this kind of Kiwi code, Kiwi psyche, is that apparently, a Kiwi company ended up like getting interest from a company in Israel. Of course, it's quite a significant tech hub. And they ended up acquiring a significant amount of the company. And there was a lot of backlash from other Kiwi companies going, you know, you've sold out. Like, you sold out, why didn't you, you sold out too early, why didn't you try and do that yourself? But that's a great example of bringing in resources and capital and funds to help you accelerate that growth more quickly and perhaps learn from what they've done as well. So, you know, it's kind of really interesting that we've got, even though with those opportunities, we've got this attitude to that, that I think, again, gets in the way of us celebrating those opportunities.
Yeah, what I hear is the tall poppy syndrome coming in there. You know, you guys have been invested in and you've sold out, and that's just really not a constructive way of viewing, I think, growth for businesses in New Zealand. That
whole humility thing, I think, you know, which is the opposite of the tall poppy. And I think, you know, you've kind of, you want to be successful, but you've got to be humble doing it. And of course, you know, humility is a valued trait as a leader, for sure. But I think we've got to stop being so humble, because then on the, you know, the opposite side of that is the, you know, being afraid to be the tall poppy because of, again, examples like that where they go, oh, you sold out, you know, too early, you should have done it yourself, which I thought was really interesting. But I think it goes back to that, you know, I was listening to a webinar by, I mean, I'm sure you've heard of them, the research agency, TRA. And they had this webinar on Kiwi codes. So there's 6 Kiwi codes. And one of them was individuality. And that I think that, you know, is what I've seen an example of, is that whole thing. That's the number 8 wire mentality. That's the, we can do this, we're as good as kind of anybody else, yet we don't need help mentality.
That's interesting. And you mentioned the word leadership there, and I've seen through some of the content that you've shared that you talk about this kind of notion of collaborative leadership. What does that look like? And
what does that look like?
And are there any good exemplars in New Zealand who we can say, look, this is a collaborative leader that we can learn from?
Yeah, look, I think collaborative leadership to me is just being not afraid to share what you've got with other leaders. I think it's again, I go back to that example of, hey, look, you can have a look at my go-to-market strategy. You can have a look at my, like sales, say if you're looking sales to sales, let me take a step back. I think there's two types of collaborative leadership. There's the collaboration between companies, and there's the collaboration internally, which is, and they're both equally important. And I think there's the collaboration whereby, again, taking a group of smaller companies it's a little bit like when I was in the accounting world, you would get groups of small business accountants that would come together and help each other.
Okay.
And they would learn, they would kind of bounce around ideas. I don't know whether they shared templates or kind of IP or anything like that, but that was a kind of a really collaborative sort of learning environment for them. And it's almost taking that sort of approach to, and I didn't know whether it's kind of appropriate to go here with this, but what we're wanting to do is to actually build a community of sales leaders in New Zealand that actually come together, that get expert speakers, that share resources, that have access to a knowledge centre, or where they can actually go, like, I needed this, or I need a tool, or I need have you got an effective outreach email, or that actually people can just, rather than reinvent their own, they can learn from some best practice. So we're wanting to build that community for tech in New Zealand. I say we, Apprento and I, and also sort of alongside that, we're developing a sales leader learning lab, just because 95% of sales leaders in New Zealand have had no sales training.
Yeah, I saw something that you shared on this the other day, which was just about the difference between investment in sales in the US and then here in New Zealand, and the difference is enormous.
It's enormous, because I think, what we do here is, again, we generally promote salespeople to sales leaders, and we don't invest in their development at all, or capability, and they're just expected to magically know and understand how to be a great leader. And that kind of blows my mind. Well, actually, it doesn't blow my mind, because I see it everywhere. And it's what happened at Xero. I love that idea of promoting from within. That's great, and that provides a career path, and that's very important for younger people in the market, particularly. They want to see that there's a career path for them to stay in an organisation, but to not put any investment behind them is a mistake. And again, it goes back to I think a little bit of the number 8 why mentality.
Go and have a crack and see how you get on.
Exactly. Rather than going, what are the global best practices around this? We're competing in the US, we're competing in the UK. We are competing at people that are putting, 3 or 4 times the amount of money or investment into developing their people as we are.
And when you look at New Zealand's reliance upon export, and I think tech is the second largest export industry in the country.
And growing all the time,
we have to be able to compete. 100%. I mean, I think sales is a really interesting area psychologically within business, because it seems like one of those areas that's almost kind of viewed as a dirty word by a lot of people. And
I'm midway through a post about that.
Cool. I look forward to seeing the final one. But one of my CEOs in the past was ex-IBM, really disciplined sales leader, structured in just about everything. Nothing happens by chance. There's a discipline there. And I think the discipline of sales is completely undervalued within the New Zealand community. We kind of see sales as this thing that happens, and it goes to the people who are able to read a room, or who have the most charm, or whatever. But
it's so not that.
It's so not that.
It's I'd say it's 80% science and maths, and the rest of it's some people skills. But at the end of the day, it's all about process, and it's all in tech. It's very much around the math of whether you want to talk about it as a flywheel or a funnel or whatever.
Yep.
It's very much around understanding the maths of that. And obviously there's an effectiveness and capability piece alongside it, for sure. But it's not an art.
No, but what I think...
Well, it's a little bit art.
I mean, there's obviously there's always going to be a difference in personality and, within the various different people along the way. But what I wonder is whether, because we are a relatively, we're a small country, and in a lot of industries, a few sales can mean the difference between making the target and not. When we're then talking about scaling something out for overseas that relies upon volume and throughput and process, that feels almost culturally alien. So how do we break that wall down?
Well, when you think about it, and I was actually talking to somebody about this yesterday, the early stages of an organisation are about finding that product market fit.
Yep.
And then the next part of it is about getting go-to-market fit.
Yep.
So you've been sort of fairly free to who you sell to in those early days, because you're trying to work out, who is this best suited for and what's the value it delivers for them. Then you get a clear idea of that, and then it's about how do we now sell at scale to that type of customer. So that's your ICP, your ideal customer profile, and it's about really nailing that niche. And so the way that I think about it is that you're trying to sell to anyone who'll buy from you in the early days. Then you get to a point where that's not going to work because you've still got limited resources, and you need to maximize the resources that you've got and really get that go-to-market fit. So you pick a segment that you're doing pretty well in, you double down on that, and everything is about winning customers in that space. Every ounce of, from the value proposition to the marketing messaging to, everything you do is tailored to winning those customers and getting that repeatability and scalability and getting some good growth. And then once you've got that, you can move out to adjacent markets from there. So that's all about getting that go-to-market fit. And then once you've done that, acceleration occurs after that. Well, you're starting to get the accelerated growth through that period. But I think what I've observed, and in both companies that I've worked for and worked with, not so much that I've worked with recently, a little bit of that, but they're trying to scale on what I would say without having that go-to-market fit.
Okay.
And so what you see is, it's the way that I would describe it is, it's like building a house on moving sands. It's not, it's kind of all in danger of collapsing at some point, because they haven't really built that repeatability and scalability.
And ultimately, that comes down to, I think some of the core pillars of marketing strategy, right? Segmentation, understand what the market looks like; targeting, work out which ponds you are going to fish in and where you start, and then positioning for those. So, if people are going to market and trying to go to market at scale without clarity on, like you said, where to put the pillars, that has to be a recipe for failure.
Yeah,
or at least slower success.
Yeah, it is. And I think people are getting better at that. But I have seen time and time again with companies that I've talked to or worked with, again, they're trying to still be a little bit too much to, too many things to too many people, that all things to all people thing. Instead of just being super focused. And it's very counterintuitive. It is counterintuitive, and you think, oh gosh, I'm narrowing my options. But if you've only got a couple of marketing resources, you've got limited salespeople you can hire or have, you really want to make sure that you're maximising the return you get from them. And
is there fear then in terms of just focusing on let's say one key segment and just owning that? Is there fear in those early days of a tech firm that if the product's not quite right or it's still kind of evolving, that they're going to burn that market? Is that part of the mindset there?
I don't think so, because you should have really established that in your product market fit phase. Ideally, I think it's a little bit of, oh gosh, I don't want to be missing out. And so the way that I've talked to a number of CEOs and people around this, I said it doesn't mean to say you don't sell to people who come in your funnel. It's about where you direct your effort. It's effectively your go-to-market strategy. We've got an elephant on the roof.
Sorry. We're used to it down in Tauranga. We've had people working on the air conditioning for months, so to come up here and find people on the roof here is a bit of a shock. But
so, for example, if you've got someone from another segment who comes and they want to buy from you, if they're easy to sell to, of course. But if they start going, oh, if you put this in the product, we'll buy it, or if you if you do this, I'll buy it.
Yep.
But there's a real danger with that, because then you start to, on the product, start to
dilute.
The kind of, again, because product strategy needs to be really aligned with your go-to-market strategy. So yeah, you can really start to dilute that and start to build a bit of a Frankenstein of a product if you don't have, that product roadmap and product, all kind of really, product roadmap really well aligned with your kind of go-to-market and the segment that you're going after. So yeah, it's not that you're not selling to other segments if they are wanting to buy from you.
Yep.
Yeah, but like, I had an example of a CEO said, it was a pretty big, like big whales came in the funnel, and I said, look, sure, yes, sell to them if they'll take it as is right now. But if they start being demanding,
big specs on it,
then the real risk is, because you've identified this as your ICP, that's actually going to be a problem.
And having that clarity at the front end. I think actually Lawview are a really good example of that here in New Zealand at the moment. They have such a specific customer that they serve, and they're just all in on in-house legal, and fantastic. More power to them.
Yeah, and they've gone really, really well. In fact, the examples that I've seen too over the last couple of years, one company that I'm on a board of, that when they really narrowed it even further, because I still said in their go-to-market strategy, it's still too broad, you need to tighten it up.
Yep.
So they did, and when they did that, things just went ticked up.
Wow.
In terms of sales and marketing, number of trials, sales did better, conversion was better, made such a difference. So it really does, it's just proven time and time again to me that that's the right thing to do.
And what would you say is the role of sales in kind of working through that understanding? Because often when you've got, salespeople who are having those initial conversations, they can be very, very well placed to actually kind of give that feedback that says, look, this is an area where we're winning a lot, when you're kind of working at that early fit. So how does that role, should we say, of sales, marketing and strategy, how do they all kind of come together in that context?
Yeah, I think data is a good place to start, right, with all of that. So, gosh, everyone's got such great tools now and access to really good data. So we should be looking at, where the data's coming from, the customers that are converting the highest, what are those numbers telling us? Sales team, do you validate, does that kind of fit in with your experience, what you're seeing? And the same with marketing, marketing and sales, meeting on a regular basis, talking about what's working, what's not working. And, again, sales giving that feedback to marketing, sales giving that feedback to product, that really kind of going back to that real collaborative approach. We deviated a little bit from the kind of thing that we were talking about before, but kind of back to really collaborating closely within the organisation, so that you haven't got these kind of silos of marketing, sales, product, but they're all kind of working really closely together.
So you talked earlier on about process and putting structure in around how that kind of piece works, and also collaboration in the same vein. So are there any tips and tricks that you would share here within that sales and marketing product alignment piece? Like any mechanisms that just work? The structures and cadences, or however that you can approach getting the best of the knowledge exchange there? Yeah,
I think it depends on the size of the organisation. Yep. But we're in a smaller organisation, it's much easier, right? And you've generally got, your exec team's product, and it's got marketing and it's got sales kind of all in it, and it's very easy for kind of marketing to catch up with the sales team on a pretty regular basis. And I generally find as companies grow bigger. They've got to make a bit more of a concerted effort with that, for sure. But I think it's just, and again, it tends to be driven by the CEO, is to, really make sure that those disciplines are working together in a structured way. And I think it goes back to that planning, goes back to that go-to-market strategy, which should be a sales and marketing thing together. And then document, or it doesn't, document, plan, whatever you want to call it. And then making sure that product strategy is aligned with that. So you're bringing in the product, the head of product in, and they're bringing their kind of piece to it as well. So it's just the communication, making sure you're aligned, making sure that those checks and balances are in place, and it all kind of comes with the quarterly planning. If I think about that, in terms of when I was at Crimson, we would sit down as an exec every quarter and kind of review like all of the pieces, and is everything aligned? These are the kind of core themes, and does everybody align with that? And then make sure that we were then taking it down into kind of goals and KPIs from that point.
And does that kind of number 8 wire mindset play out there as well? We touched on underinvestment in leadership. To what extent do you sort of see execs who should be managing by process, managing by numbers, actually trying to get too involved in the execution and actually getting involved in the doing when perhaps their effort should be spent somewhere else? Is that a thing that you see?
Yeah, I do see a little bit. Definitely see a little bit. It's but again, sometimes this is a scaling issue where sometimes you'll end up with leaders having to be key coach players, which is the impossible job. You're trying to be a leader, but you're also trying to sell and do both roles, and that's a really tough gig. And so they kind of have to be involved, and then there gets to a point when they need to step out of that and they need to build the skills and capability. One thing I would say though is that everybody underinvests in coaching. Like if you could go, one thing to grow the skills and capability, it would be, but I don't think people know how to coach effectively. That's the other thing. I mean, I thought I was a pretty good sales coach before I did a international coaching certification, and then realised I was absolutely crap at it. And it kind of broke me, and I had to build up that capability after it, through the program.
Question: What were what did you find were your shortcomings?
Oh, not asking enough questions, doing too much telling, not I knew theoretically that it was about trying to get them to realise themselves, like the coachee or the salesperson, to be the one that has the realisation. My job is to ask great questions to uncover that. But when you've been a reasonable salesperson yourself, you can't help, and you've got targets to meet, and you just want to jump in there and tell them. And and I still did way too much of that. And even though they say, like in sales, that should be an 80-20, 80 asking, 20 telling, whereas in a true coach to coachee, it's never about the coach, it's all about the coachee. So it should be never telling, always just asking great questions and using frameworks to help them. It's like they call it like, shining a light in the deep, dark recesses of their mind. They've got all the answers, they just don't know they have all the answers, the coachee that is. Whereas actually in sales, they don't necessarily always have all the answers, and sometimes you play a little bit more of that mentor role. But what I see is, again, taking an example of companies that I've worked in and for, they're moving so fast, there's so much to do, that there's just not the time spent like listening to calls, coaching around calls, going into meetings with the salesperson, and not trying to sell, but stepping back and developing that salesperson's capability. It's a real struggle because it's just, there's so much demanded of you when you're in a kind of fast-growing company.
All right, I can imagine. I mean, I haven't been in a fast tech export business myself. Was in a mobile tech startup for a little while back in Australia, but I haven't been in that sort of seat of holding a tiger by the tail and hoping you can bring the thing under control. But back to the coaching piece, are there any places that you would actually recommend people to go to for advice on coaching, or anyone that's worthy of a follow or absorbing information from?
I mean, I think there's a lot of great coaches all over the place. In terms of a great follow, probably not an area that I spend a huge amount of time in, because I've done that work myself. I've done, I invested in my own development some years back in well over kind of 11, 12, 13 years ago. And that was something that it's actually helped me in every role that I've been in. But that was a significant kind of personal investment. I don't expect people to do that. I think, what I started to see even at Xero was some investment, and even learning models like Grow and the coaching circle and some basic stuff that you can kind of, there's a lot of stuff free and available online. And then, other companies bring in experienced coaches to coach the executive team. And like anything, that those skills and capability can flow down through an organisation.
Yeah. Now coming back to your piece earlier on about community and building up, that collaborative community. One thing that certainly in the marketing world that's kind of appeared recently is the marketing club. So it's backed by the Marketing Association. It's a Slack community of marketers who can basically stick up their hand and say help. And within a short period of time, that's become 500 plus members strong, very, very active community. Do you see something like that existing for the tech space and for leaders and execs there as well?
Yeah, I love that idea, and that's absolutely what we're going to have in the community that we're building, that we're launching next year because of Christmas and election and kind of all of that. But yeah, that's definitely something that we want. So they can basically go like, hey, I'm struggling here, or have you got a this, or like I've been a member of Pavilion for like the last 3 years, and actually was co-chapter head of Pavilion, which is a global organisation that actually started out revenue leaders all around the world that had a Slack community. You could DM anyone on Slack. It had a whole knowledge hub of resources, still does, courses, everything. But what I've found, is that they went through some changes, and in the last kind of couple of years hasn't been so great for Asia Pac. It is based in New York, in the US, and so it's very heavily US and Europe centric, and it hasn't catered as well for us in APAC.
Yep.
But in terms of what they're doing, it's very similar to what you said. They've got a Slack community, you've got a knowledge hub where people can pop in resources.
Fantastic.
So what we're trying to do is kind of bring that back to New Zealand. Some of those ideas. We're not
replicating.
No, we're not. We're going to do something a little different, but bring in some of those similar things whereby, like you are, people can reach out if they need help. People can share materials. They can share things that they're using, because I think people would like to, but they don't know where to go for it, and they can't always afford like a Pavilion membership. And I don't know that that's going to give them the best value for money anyway.
Yep.
Than perhaps learning from other Kiwi companies. So that's something that I think would be really helpful. And the other thing that I was chatting to Michael at Sway Tech the other day as well, and what he's trying to do, and again I really applaud this, is build a community of fractional leaders.
Yep.
So that collaborate together. And I've done quite a lot of fractional work over the last few years, and so it's about, okay, I've got someone I know who could come in and help you with that, and being able to provide kind of collective input and collaboration to organisations so that they don't have to hire in all these or employ people, but they can bring people in for a specific period of time to help solve problems that they've got that might get them to the next stage where they can hire somebody internally. So I think they're really trying to do something there too, to kind of collectively and collaboratively be able to kind of help companies in this space too.
Because I guess that's half of the challenge as well, in terms of making sure that you have the right leadership team is finding them. Yeah, and actually that's the other thing. I mean, it's a little easier now in the last 18 months, but prior to that, trying to find a salesperson or a sales leader in both New Zealand and Australia was really, really challenging. Yeah.
And crazy money that you had to pay to actually, headhunt someone or to hire someone. And that just, again, if you're going to hire anyone out of Australia, you're going to have to pay 30% more.
Yep.
It's roughly kind of 25 to 30% more. So that's quite tough for some Kiwi companies. But the just real lack of experienced tech leaders here in New Zealand. It's a challenge, and there's more and more that are growing their capability, and I think we're getting more going to conferences like SASS and bringing that experience back and bringing those skills back. And we just need to do more of that. We need to do more of that at scale, because SASS is a pretty expensive conference away, so you've got to be at a reasonable state of growth
to actually be able
to afford to send someone across there.
So you're obviously deeply entrenched within the tech space. New Zealand's tech success is tied to your success. What would you ask of the audience as some sort of final thoughts here? Like what can the New Zealand tech community do to help the New Zealand tech community?
Yeah, I think it's goes back to the thing that we very first talked about, which is going to be hard, given that I think it's deep in our psyche. It's don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to reach out. Please share if you've done anything that you think has worked really well. Like, let us know, even if you just post on LinkedIn about it, or let other people know, because I really believe in that kind of principle of there's plenty of opportunity for everybody.
Yep.
And that rising tide floats all boat mentality.
Yep.
Is that we can really help one another, and let's not waste time reinventing the wheel.
Yeah.
Share what we've got. Yeah. Ask for help, and I think it's going to help. It will help everybody, and it'll be tough for a lot of us.
Yeah, I think there's a psychological safety component to that. Feeling exposed and vulnerable by sharing. Maybe this hasn't worked, or we did this and it didn't work, or likewise, putting up success and then, well, did it work? Was it actually good by other people's standards? But I think I love what you're saying in terms of just building this open, collaborative community that actually helps each other, that isn't afraid to put their hand up, isn't afraid to ask for help, and ultimately can help what is a huge industry for New Zealand to do a better job of competing in markets where we're often outgunned.
Yeah, and Kiwi SASS, to be fair to Kiwi SASS, they're definitely trying to do that as well. They're really trying to provide a community that people can reach out and kind of ask for help and share, and so they're trying to do a little bit of that as well. And I think the more people that do this and provide forums and opportunities to do that, kind of helps everybody.
Fantastic.
And I'd love to see NZTE continue to invest in those the global transformation programs and things like that, because again, I think that helps all those other little ones that perhaps aren't doing as well as the kind of big one or two or three that generally are always the ones that get the limelight.
The ones that kind of everyone sees and knows.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, look, we'll probably wrap that up there, but that was just such an interesting conversation. Thank you so much for sharing, and I look forward to sharing this out with the world and hopefully seeing the community kind of rally around and carry itself forward.
You're welcome. It's been good to talk to you. Yeah.